Hey, I'm Neil, and we have another micro trend to go over. That's UI abstraction. Okay, so I'm going to pause this and we'll come back to it in a second. So I'm on the Slack marketing page, features page. We have some UI screenshots over here. Now, they're not 100% screenshots. I think these were created as assets, but for all practical purposes, let's treat them as screenshots. We have a lot of live text baked in. Some of the small text is quite hard to read. And let's look at an alternative to that. An alternative to screenshots is abstracted UI. Okay, now I'm on Vimeo's website, and rather than using screenshots, we have heavily abstracted UI shots. So there's no text over here, it's all gray boxes, there's some images, and the UI is heavily simplified. Okay, so they have a few different examples of that. Another thing we often see with UI abstraction is layering. So you're going to take a modal, a card, a UI element, and bring it outside of the UI to call more attention to it. Okay, so this one's a little bit different in that it actually does have English text baked into it. And we have that in a few ways. Okay, Vimeo's website also has UI abstractions in video form. Here's an example that I actually personally worked on. This is my work for Google Chrome. And again, we have very heavy UI abstraction, no text, more creative approach. And this is illustrating autocomplete in the Google search omnibox. So you type a few characters, results come down, the user selects one. This is a set of abstracted UI animations that I created with Lottie that were on google.com/Chrome or chrome.com. So why do we do UI abstraction? It's more than just a creative approach, and it's more than just drawing the user's attention to the selected element. Okay, that's usually the main motivation, is you want to call out a feature or a part of the UI and avoid the user getting distracted with all the other elements. Well, there's practical implementation or practical benefits also. Okay, I mentioned not having text baked into the asset. So like we saw over here with Slack, when I'm zoomed out, the text can get very hard to read. So when we're optimizing assets, that text can get really crunchy and it can completely turn into gray mush essentially at certain font sizes. It also has accessibility and localization impacts as well. So for accessibility, any text that we have baked into an asset, technically we should be providing a caption for that so a screen reader can read all of it. Now there is a ton of text in this asset. That's going to be a lot of text for a screen reader to read. The other thing is for localization. So right now I'm viewing the US EN version of the site, so English US locale. If there are, say, 15, 20 plus locales, technically all of the text of these assets should be translated and localized. That is a lot of work for the localization partners to do and for the designers to accommodate. So we can get around that by completely removing all actual text from the assets. So these assets don't really need to be localized at all. The only localization that might happen is changing from left to right to left if you want to serve those assets for different locales. Okay. In other cases, we have some minimal text baked into the assets. For other locales, there are basically two approaches. The one approach is to just translate and localize the small amount of text. The other approach is for non-EN US locales to just abstract it. So if I'm viewing, say, the Spanish version of this site, I'm not going to see real text here. I'm just going to see gray boxes. I'm only going to see real text for the US EN locales. Okay, these are all just different approaches to get around, to accommodate and work with accessibility and localization for these assets. Okay, so there's another approach here, and this is what Stripe does. They do it quite differently. So these aren't actually assets. By assets, I mean PNG, GIF, JPEG, video files, WebM, whatever. This is all live HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I can tell because I'm selecting all of this. This is live text. If I really wanted to, I could go into my developer tools here and change this to, my own name. So their Stripe's graphics tend to be quite interactive. This has a benefit for them on the performance side because the live code, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, is more performant than having to load in heavy video files. Okay, it also gives them the benefit of being able to rapidly accommodate changes. One of the downsides to providing screenshots like this is what if Slack's UI changes? UI changes happen all the time in small ways, Let's say they update so much as this arrow icon and provide new arrow icons. Now, their screenshots on their main feature landing page are out of date, and they have to re-export all of those. That's a big change to accommodate, and when you have UI abstractions, you typically get to avoid having to change the assets every single time there's a UI update. But with Slack's approach, if they do want to accommodate that change, they can change the live text, they can update a color, they can update padding. Small changes can be accommodated much more easily. The other benefit, and this isn't something that they're actually doing, is you could make these UI elements interactive. So these buttons are built in code, but they don't have hover states. I can't click this button, but they could do that if they wanted to, and I think that would be a cool change. It's something I've always felt about Slack's graphics actually, is that they're putting in so much work to make them interactive, but that benefit isn't obvious to me as the user. If I could actually type into these text fields, if I could click this button, that would really make this feel more alive. Okay, so we have a real range of UI abstraction here. Let me show you a different approach, which is mostly for video, and that's 3D animation. This is Buck's work from Microsoft a few years ago. This is revealing their new UI system. And look at how all of these digital UI elements, UI cards, turn physical. Okay, this is another sort of approach to UI abstraction. You don't really see it as much, but I really like it here. And so as the video goes on, somewhere around here, you get to see these like different material and textural properties of the UI elements. It's really well done. And Claudio Guglielmo, who is a designer that I really respect, is taking a similar approach with his Web3 NFT project, Focus Time. So we have a calendar, we have physical properties. These are all 3D modeled, I think in Blender, and there's a bit of a video as well. So he's bringing these to life with character animation. So that's on the way other end of the spectrum. If Slack screenshots are on one end, this is totally the opposite of it. But UI abstraction is a very, very powerful tool, and it definitely should be used more.